Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Celia Martinez. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm currently serving as an AmeriCorps member at PS 171 in East Harlem. In my role, I spend most of my day with 20 bright fifth graders and learning from each other. As all AmeriCorps members do, I try my best every day to support the students individually, collectively, socially, and academically. I'm excited to have the opportunity to moderate today's panel. We will be discussing the intersectionality between entrepreneurship, philanthropy, and equity. The main question our panelists will try to answer today is, in an economy where one's personal brand can dictate professional opportunities and outcomes, how might one exercise their social identity and passions while maintaining business-related endeavors? With that in mind, I want to introduce our group of panelists for today. First, we have Cedric Bobo, who is the co-founder of Project Destined, a virtual internship program in real estate for diverse high school and undergraduate students. Next, we have Jessica Taylor, a managing director in the Office of Corporate Engagement at Goldman Sachs and the national director of Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. Also joining us is AJ Jordan, who is the head of community relations at the Wells Fargo Foundation. And last but not least, we have Kayla Johnson, who is community school director with Center for Supportive Schools, a former City Year New York AmeriCorps member, and the current chair of our alumni board network. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's kick things off by having each of you tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role. Let's start with Cedric.
Well, first, Celia, thank you, and City, you're so much for having me. My name is Cedric Bobo, as you shared. I'm the co-founder of Project Destined, which trains students how to become owners in their own communities. For my starters, I'm a small town kid from Mississippi, and I always wanted to become an owner. I didn't know how the heck to do it, and so I started down a path of engineering, and then got fortunate enough to land on Wall Street, and then spent 20 years in private equity, primarily at the Carlyle Group. I've had the privilege of operating Project Destined now for 5 years. We train about 1,000 students every single year across 25 markets in the US, Europe, and now Canada. And it's really a privilege to spend time with you all today.
Thank you so much for sharing. Jessica, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Happy King Day. This is awesome to be able to be here with you all. As Celia mentioned, I'm Jessica Taylor. I am currently the National Director of 10,000 Small Businesses, which is one of Goldman Sachs' kind of signature philanthropic program. I have probably a background that is a bit anormal for someone at Goldman Sachs. I started my career as a Peace Corps volunteer, actually, wow, in Guatemala for 2 years, and then did nonprofit work in a few different cities in the U.S. focused on youth development and community health. And then went to grad school that brought me to New York City, where I did public policy and really got into local economic development, worked for the city of New York under Mayor Mike Bloomberg, and then transitioned to Goldman. So for me, the through line has always been kind of service and giving back. And so couldn't be more pleased to be here. And again, 10,000 Small Businesses is in essence kind of a mini MBA for entrepreneurs to help them take their business to the next level. And so we partner with Babson College. We partnered with them over a decade ago to create a entrepreneurship education curriculum. And we've now served over 12,400 businesses across the entire 50 states. So I'm happy to share more today.
Thank you so much. AJ?
Great. Well, first, good morning. Happy King Day. And I want to first and foremost say, it's really inspirational opening ceremony. One of the speakers right at the outset talked about beauty, love, and justice, and that's certainly a perfect theme for today and part of this conversation. And Celia, also glad to see that you're doing your service year at Patrick Henry School. And I realized that our company actually sponsored the City Year team there a few years back and did a massive service project, and still remember the Dr. Seuss themed hallway mural, I think on the second or third floor, that I'm very proud of. And Wells Fargo, of course, has been a longtime supporter of not only City Year New York, but City Year chapters across the country. But I'm AJ Jordan. I serve as head of community relations for the Wells Fargo Foundation, which is one of the largest foundations in the country. lead a national team of public affairs leaders that oversee about $100 million in philanthropic investments to develop. And we also develop public and private partnerships with community stakeholders. So again, as a long time champion of city, as you can see by my backdrop here, really excited to be here and serve on the panel.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. We'll move on to our next question, which is also for all of the panelists. And it asks, how is your social identity tied to and reflected in the work that you do? Jessica, do you mind answering first?
Sure. Happy to answer that question. I think after sharing a bit of my background, I think as you all can tell, it is important for me in my professional work to really give back. Earlier in my career, I was very deep in communities and I loved that work. And I was really motivated to go to graduate school and focus on public policy to think about how do you scale those types of interventions locally, right? If they have an impact in one community, how do you expand that impact? And so for me, studying public policy was an appropriate route for that. And of course, once you think about scaling, right, the conundrum is, well, as I think more and more about scaling, I become maybe further removed from the community work. And so then it becomes a decision of how do I find the right professional opportunities that still keep me, close to community or are able to connect with those in the community, but allow me to, again, drive impact at scale. And so for me, working with the City of New York, I worked actually in the Department of Small Business Services and managed a federally funded grant program that supported nonprofits across the city to do local economic development work. And so that was a huge opportunity for me, still fairly new to New York, to have kind of that bird's eye view on local economic development in the city, and to do that by way of partnerships with various amazing nonprofits. And so that was kind of this perfect position for me to be able to, again, drive impact and still connect with those implementing the work and not feel too far removed from that. And then fast forward to 10,000 small businesses. Our model is we give grants to community colleges who, with those grants, hire local teams to manage the day-to-day program, small businesses, to delivering the education curriculum, to engaging small businesses as alums. And so it's really inspiring to kind of connect with our partners, those community college partners, but also still have connectivity with the businesses that we serve and to really be proximate to their amazing stories. And so I've been able to, up to this point, kind of still have impact in what I do and still have some proximity to those kind of driving the change in communities across the US. So I feel very, just very grateful for that opportunity. And so for me, kind of my social identity of kind of giving back as I think about the various roles that I seek to do.
Great, thank you. Cedric, would you like to answer next?
Yeah, I mean, my identity has always been wrapped up in the idea of ownership and creating owners. I think if you look around your neighborhood, you see it changing and you wonder how to participate, and sometimes you feel like a victim. For me, I'm from Mississippi, and I'll say it 100 times. And I had a great grandfather, about 100 acres of land in 1890, built a series of agricultural businesses. And I wanted to be an owner like him. The thing I share in common with all my students, I didn't have clarity of path. I knew I could do it. I knew I deserved to be an owner. I just didn't have a visible path forward. And so for me, I studied engineering in school. I happened to do a summer program at Harvard Business School, and then found my way to Wall Street. And I discovered there were people who invested other folks' money in private equity. And I did that for 20 years. But I also started buying little crappy apartment units in London and in the US. And I discovered like you could own buildings in your neighborhood as a source of income, but also as a way of having influence in the community. And so after 10 years at Carlisle, the business went public, and I had the resources to build something on my own. And all I wanted to build was, one, I wanted to invest more money in real estate, but two, I wanted to go around the country and build an apprenticeship program where more high school students and college students could do it. And today we've got 150 corporate partners, including Goldman and Wells Fargo. All we do together is sit around and think about what do high school kids, college kids need to get in the game. But the first part of it is mentally how you see yourself. The biggest part of being successful is seeing yourself as successful. And so my identity has always been being an owner, but also trying to help others find that path to ownership.
Great, thank you. AJ, do you want to share?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. I would say for me, many aspects of my social identity have probably played an important role in shaping my career, being a person of color, even a father, a dad, and two daughters. Probably the biggest social identity influencer for me has been my personal values and belief system in social justice, in a sense of fairness and equity, and ensuring that all people, especially young people, regardless of background or personal circumstance, have a fair shot at achieving success. And that's probably rooted in my own family story that I often tell that I'm very proud of. My dad, I think of King Day, and I think of my dad and my grandfather. And my dad was the oldest son in his family to attend, and first in his family to attend college. My grandfather, who was a minister for many years, had put my dad through college by opening up a family hot dog stand. So that's my kind of introduction to entrepreneurship, and had all my dad's younger siblings working the hot dog stand, and the church congregation at the time supported it. And they scraped enough money to send my dad to, at the time it was called CYNY State University, it's the HBCU outside of Philadelphia, CYNY University now. And that story inspired my dad's siblings to attend college. It was an inspiration to me, and I really dedicated my career to addressing issues of diversity and equity, and improving educational outcomes for young people. So throughout my career, I started as a social worker for a Head Start program. And then I worked in the nonprofit sector for a number of years, organizing grassroots coalition and lobbying efforts for public education. And I'd say as my career advanced and I got into the corporate sector, one of the things that I saw as a national corporate philanthropy leader of color, and I'm reminded of this statistic by the Robin Hood Foundation in New York, that started a fund to support more Black-led organizations, that said over the last 20 years, while philanthropic giving has increased over 400%, only 10% of those resources have gone to people of color-led or BIPOC-led organizations. And that's clearly a real issue when you think of equity in the philanthropy space. So I've made a commitment in my career, certainly in the role that I have on a national scale, to help reverse this trend. And through our foundation, I know we're being very intentional about putting a racial equity lens on our grant making. So that's really what drives me in my work every day.
Great, thank you so much. So as everyone can start to see, we have a very impressive panel with us today. We have Kayla joining us today too. I know we're experiencing some slight technical difficulties, but if you wouldn't mind by telling us a little bit about yourself and your current role.
No problem. Thank you guys for your patience regarding technical difficulties. Kayla Johnson, Center for Supportive Schools, High School in the North Bronx. I manage the day-to-day school, which is providing holistic support to our students, from mental health support to helping with attendance, family resources, just pretty much anything that the school needs to be successful, and really kind of giving the students. Also the board chair for City Board, 83 Harlem, as well as the team. We proud to continue to work, even in my current professional role, continue to here, my nonprofit, to work in the Bronx.
Great, thank you so much. And then Kayla, I'll ask you one more question. It says, how is your social identity tied to and reflected in the work that you do?
So for my social identity, I really think about the women in my life who are in the education field, who are really inspire me to continue to work in schools, to get either these are or neighborhoods like it where I work. And I think a really big thing through my family is that ensuring that we have a back to those that look like us, and that we're really kind of being intentional about how to make a difference in our communities. I think when I think back to my identity, it's really paving the way. Me thinking education is a way for me to not only advance myself, but those around me, and to really kind of give back to communities, either my direct community or those like mine.
Great, thank you. Okay, for the next phase, we will have a question for each panelist. So the first is for Cedric, and it asks, How do you make sure the people you are connecting with have the same ideals as you? Or when dealing with those who don't necessarily match those ideals, how do you make sure your values are not compromised?
Yeah. And I'll take a step back. I mean, I'll just tell everyone here, like every day I wake up and I have tons of insecurities and an internal voice that probably tells me maybe you're not good enough. But what always helps me take a step forward is I just set a goal. I don't know if it's the right goal all the time or just a decent goal, but I have a goal, and that goal just helps me just take one step forward. It also helps me figure out how to get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off. And that's been that way since I was a little kid. It's just like I just had this fear of like, my grandmother would tell me, who you hang around kind of says more about you than what you say. And so for me, I start every day with a goal in mind, and I have big picture goals. And I look around me and say, do the people I have around me reflect and support those aspirations? And also, when I have moments of tremendous insecurity, or I'm starting something new, like when I started Project Destin, I mean, I go kind of underground like a rapper, man. Like I just kind of go into my tunnel. I focus on my goal and I separate it. And what I don't do is call people looking for them to confirm my goals. I first just got to get some momentum. And so for me, it's always been about having a simple set of goals that guide me, reflecting on those are the right goals, but then always moving and pushing forward with the right people on that bus.
Great, thank you. And if any of the other panelists want to jump in at any point and add anything, please feel free. The next question is for Jessica. It says, how do you provide with a set of guidelines and systems to help expand their business without losing their ideas, ideals, and individuality?
Yeah, I would first say, with all of the social media and the external brands that people put forward, I would say that it's more important now than ever to be authentic, right? And to really have that shine through. And so what we do with 10,000 Small Businesses is we make a program that focuses on the business owner and their business, right? The business owners aren't coming into this program to study the financials of Fortune 500 companies. They're using their own businesses as case studies, and we empower them by the simple point that no one else knows your business more than you, right? So we're here to help you understand and help you take that business to the next level and figure out, how do you better assess your own financials? How do you improve your own ability to lead and hire? How do you improve your ability to market and sell, et cetera? And so we help to kind of give them the tools to drive what is core to them, right? Which is their small business. And the key deliverable for businesses coming out of our program is what we call a growth plan. And the growth plan is the business owner putting pen to paper on a specific growth opportunity and the key steps they're going to take to achieve that opportunity, right? And that kind of relates to exactly what Cedric just said about having a goal, right? Through this program, we orient the business owners to a particular growth goal, right? And we help them kind of get there and put pen to paper on the plan to get there. And so I think, sometimes there is in society this trade-off between kind of what you think society may be telling you to do and what you feel is authentic to yourself. And I would say the real road to get there is to remain authentic, right? That trade-off is kind of it's just false. And I would say that the people who I've come in contact with at Goldman, with our partners, with the small businesses, I think the common thread throughout all of that is that folks kind of have been able to identify what's true to them, their own authenticity within kind of whatever they're seeking to do, and they stay true to that. And so I would just encourage everyone to really find what's true to you, right, and drive that forward.
Great, thank you. I really love all this talk between authenticity and teaching. So AJ, we'd like to hear from you next. The question is, in representing a financial institute, what are some of the actions you take in order to gain the trust of communities you have a presence in, especially those in systemically under-resourced communities?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say, first and foremost, when you talk about as a corporation, trying to build community trust and credibility, and be authentic too in how we're engaging with the community, as Jessica pointed out. I think it starts with listening, right? And not assuming just because you have a lot of resources and you're one of the biggest financial institutions in the country, in the world, you have all the answers to solving, systemic issues that have gone back many, many years. So truly actively listening to community leaders, actively listening to residents, listening to those end users of the philanthropy that you're putting out into the community. During COVID, just as an example, I'll share maybe a couple quick examples. During the COVID crisis, when it first hit, we heard for unrestricted grant funding, right? Don't have us go through all the grant making process and wait, weeks and weeks or months, but really get the money out quickly, unrestricted, kind of the idea of trust-based philanthropy. And we listened and helped our nonprofit partners, quite frankly, keep their doors open, one, to provide services, but also remembering that nonprofits are small businesses too, and a big part of that sector. We held listening sessions with BIPOC-led organizations. And we did this, we've been doing this the last year. We're really going and saying to organizations that are led by Black and Brown leaders, what are the needs? How can we be a better partner? We're taking that information. That's going to be part of our philanthropic approach moving forward. That's helped to gain some credibility and community trust. When it comes to supporting diverse entrepreneurs and small businesses, certainly during COVID, these businesses took a major, major hit. So we did things like created the Open for Business Fund. So we took all the proceeds from the Payroll Protection Act federal loan program that supported small businesses during COVID, which generated for Wells about $400 million over the course of a year. We could have put that money towards profit. And instead, we created the Open for Business Fund, which provides capital and technical assistance for diverse businesses and allows them to own more of their own businesses. And you might say, well, how does that make sense if you're already a small business? How do you own more of your own small business? Well, if you're a small business and you're in retail and you don't own the building that you're in, and you don't own the supplies, or you don't own the equipment, you don't really own your business. If you can be making a great profit, but if your landlord increases the rent by 20%, that profit margin is wiped out. So really helping diverse small businesses purchase buildings so they can really control and own more of their business. We launched last year during the holidays the Hope USA campaign, where we work with minority contractors to revitalize diverse small and got our employees engaged. Even during COVID, we were out there in our red volunteer shirts and did things to support some of the minority contractors. We provided financial literacy education. We're also looking at some of our products and services through our banking, and knowing that philanthropy alone can't solve the issue, that it has to also coincide with our business practices. So I think a combination of all those things, listening, incorporating feedback, and taking action, has really increased our trust and credibility within the community.
And on that one too, I would say from our perspective at Goldman and 10,000 small businesses, due diligence is a really big deal for us, meaning that before we bring 10,000 small businesses to a city, we spend months and months talking to people in the community, right? Making sure that they understand what it is that we're going to be offering. We get their feedback, to AJ's point, as to whether this resource is needed and whether they'd be bought into kind of helping us talk about the resource locally. So it's not, I'm not going to Baltimore and knocking on the doors of various small business owners trying to convince them to take 10,000 small businesses. It's the amazing local partners that we've stewarded in Baltimore that go out and bring that legitimacy to our. We have to spend a lot of time up front in cultivating those relationships and cultivating those partnerships. And it can't be something that's quite honestly done quickly, right? Otherwise, it doesn't feel genuine and it doesn't feel authentic, and folks aren't really bought in. So you really have to bring people along and invest time in order to do that and get feedback. I would say the other thing that's important to building trust in communities is having a product that's impactful. So having something that works, right? So for us, I would say, the Goldman Sachs Foundation is set up differently, right, than other foundations at other financial institutions. For us, we basically have kind of signature interventions that we invest our funding in, and we work that intervention over a long period of time. And so what we're able to do by way of that approach is track progress over time, right? So we survey our businesses at baseline, graduation, and then 6, 18, and 30 months after completing the program. And so we're able to track the impact of that curriculum and that educational experience on their business growth over time. And so what we see is that about 66% of our businesses report increases in revenues and 47% report creating new jobs. And so having kind of this intervention that we just kind of work over time and we continuously improve over time, and we can say, hey, it's driving these actual results, it's driving growth. I think that also helps to build trust in communities when you've put together a quality product that's serving people in the community. And then those folks can then say, you know, yes, it worked, right? Here's how that program, here's how that intervention helped me, and here's how I'm continuing to grow.
Great. Thank you so much, AJ and Jessica, for sharing. Finally, we have a question for Kayla. It says, what do you look for in bringing resources for your school and students and their families?
And so is in new my school, think about our school. 70% of our looking for partners that are bilingual, ones that are familiar with working with, ones that have resources that on the service that they're looking to provide before being able to person. Now that we're back in school, full research to be able to come meet the students and the families where they are. And consistent here at a lot of partners show up for 1 or 2 sessions to continue changes with us are very similar to what knowing students or at least to learn more about them, really being consistent, and then of course like anything, school's mission, which develops our students to be not only leaders within the classroom, but leaders within with our really strong, and then also know that they are just that we're going on with the current school environment, but also with really kind of being able to step to the plate and knowing that every day when you come to my school, that because you're really here for the students, our families, and to meet the mission of our.
Thank you. Okay, now it is time for our last pre-curated question, which will be posed to the entire panel. And that is, how does one keep themselves balanced in your work when your work or project and passions don't completely align? Let's start with AJ.
Sure. A great question and an important one, particularly I think about the city of your core that are here, and as you plot out and look to advance your career. I would say for myself, I feel fortunate that generally my day-to-day work and passion and commitment for public service, for equity, for social justice, it is in alignment with professional role. So that's important. And I would say, again, particularly for the city of your core, if you find yourself in a situation where your work and values and passions don't align, and not that it's going to happen every single day, but you feel something in your gut, hey, this doesn't sync up here, you don't feel good about what I'm doing, it's probably time for a different line of work. And that's, as straightforward as that could be on that. But I would say in general, there's just always people that you come across that don't always share your values, and we all have that. And I like what Cedric said earlier, sometimes if you don't have the right people on the bus around you, then you have to get some folks off the bus or find another bus. But I would say, dealing with folks who don't always share your values or see eye to eye is one. I found this worked for me. Assume good intent, right? Assume good intent. Really seek to understand, to listen, and to seek to understand people's perspective, and always, you know, you have the ability to educate people and move people towards your position. You know, I was thinking about a conversation I had with a nonprofit leader not too long ago. This was a person who was not a person of color, who I admire and respect. But we were talking about diversity, and this person runs an organization that supports probably 98% of his constituents or communities of color. But yet on the senior leadership team, the entire team is non-diverse. And we talked about it, and he used as an excuse kind of, well, we can't find enough qualified people. And this is, I sit in the city of Philadelphia. And so, of course, in Philadelphia, there's a lot of diverse talent. So instead of kind of coming down hard on that person, I sought to understand and educate. I opened up my network of diverse leaders to the individual, and they're going to work to diversify their board. So always try and find ways to find common ground, educate. Not everyone's going to share your values, but you can certainly persuade them to adopt your point of view. And the things that really matter most to you, like believing in the power of young people and equity in our communities.
I would chime in and first say, AJ, I'm a native of Philadelphia, so shout out. I would say that in your day-to-day, a lot of things are going to come up, right? So you might not always feel that perfect alignment. And I think that there's a reality to that we should kind of acknowledge. And that's okay, right? I think if you can find a place where, generally speaking, the overall goal, right, is something that aligns with what you want to do in your value set, I think that's really good. But to expect maybe that every day things align, that can be a great goal. You just might not get there. And I think that's okay. And we should maybe be okay with that. I also agree with AJ that, there's an opportunity to really be a culture carrier. That's kind of how we term it at Goldman, whereby the experience, the perspective that you have, you should feel empowered that's unique, and that provides value to your team, to your organization, to your partners in the field. And so I think it does kind of go back to that point of authenticity. And there's some work environments that can make it harder for you to be authentic. And you just kind of have to push ahead. And I always find that it's easier to be authentic, maybe in some of those tough environments, when you do a good job and your work is sound and people at a minimum respect the work that you do, right? Then it creates more space, right, for you to kind of say, in addition to bringing this excellent work to the table, here's what you also get, right? You get my perspective. You get my experience that, by the way, maybe looking at some other people around this table is very unique, right? But I do find that if you're not kind of delivering on the baseline of work, I think it's going to be harder for folks who may not be value aligned with you. It's going to be harder for them to look to you as a culture carrier if they feel that your work product, right, isn't sound. And so I do think those two do relate, especially in work environments that can be very rigorous. So I would say authenticity is always the rule. I would say even if you're not surrounded by folks who have similar values as you, there is an opportunity to be a culture carrier over time. That work takes time. That's another thing I want to emphasize. This isn't you coming in brand new, super green to a large organization, making change right away. It's building trust with your colleagues over time, again, through your work product. It's them respecting you and your work product. And then that gives you the space over time to be the culture carrier, right? To push the needle forward, to share more of your authentic self, of your perspective and your experience. So I think of it as a little bit of a long game. And, I sit in corporate America. A lot of us here sit in corporate America. That's a long game. That's a long game in terms of how do you affect change both internally within the organization and externally in terms of how that organization shows up in communities. And so I think folks just need to be aware and have patience with that process, but feel empowered by the fact that you can be that culture carrier. And more, I'm finding that, these corporations are seeing the value of that. So really the time is now to kind of show up as your full self. And but baseline, that has to be grounded in good work, in quality work.
Thank you so much for sharing. Kayla, would you mind answering next?
I think about alignment, and for myself, if I ever feel like some days I don't feel aligned to my work, back around once a year, both my service school, like why I showed up, but if I don't feel aligned with work, and so I want to take on this position in the first place, or I was what are the new things I was looking to get out of this opportunity. If someone, I don't think their story or purpose for why not identify on the certain level. I think it really, your relationships, asking, people what they hope to get out of their short term. I think if you find that commonality, it'll help bridge those up so that you're working towards your mission, even if it is something small that you have in common. Showing up every day, or at least make some strides towards it, but also helping other people in their and hopefully pushing it further towards it. If they're putting effort, it can help advance each other. It really is starting with your own personal, the why of the purpose, the actions of other people, so that you can push forward your work in an intention.
Thank you. And finally, Cedric, we'd love to hear from you.
It's Cedric.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we still can't hear you quite yet.
What about now?
There.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, I was going to say I'm pretty fortunate in that sort of my goals are nearly kind of 100% aligned with in my work life, 100% aligned with my values. Even 100, I've had 150 staff members and they're all alums, and that's a pretty fortunate position. But I think the reason why I've been successful is because I had lots of interim steps and I was a grinder. I think so much of life is you got to build skills, a personal brand, and relationships. And I did that over the course of 20 years. And then, I was fortunate enough to build something with people that I cared about that reflects my values. And so I think for young people today, it's like you don't have to get it all in 1 year. Take time, put together a plan that has these interim steps and a path that really affirm your values. I think if you race out too quickly, you will make poor decisions and you will become self-critical. And it disables you from being able to move forward swiftly. So my advice to anyone is just put forth those interim steps towards that goal. And your job, number one, is to be an authentic, as Jessica says, but also a compelling individual. So when you seek to go and achieve that alignment, that people actually want you on their bus. And that's what's really critical for me.
Okay, thank you everybody for sharing. We now want to open it up to the audience for any questions you may have. So please feel free to place those in the chat. In the meantime, I do have another question. It asks, and if anyone wants to try to answer it, it says, how do you partner or maintain relationships with partners who aren't as aligned to social justice issues as you are? So as we gather some questions from the audience, if anyone would like to try to answer that, it would be great.
I would say you have to figure out what drives that partner, right? Everyone has a motive or something that they're excited by. And so rather than start off with the end goal in mind of where you want to lead them, I think start off with, well, where are they, right? What interests them? What drives them? What motivates this partner? how can I try to meet them where they are? So I would just, again, break out that long journey, right, of eventually kind of aligning holistically on a value set, and just start off with what's driving this person. I think this probably aligns with what Kayla just said, right, around what's their why, and try to relate to them on that particular piece. And maybe you'll find that actually we're more aligned than I thought, right? And so I just think you just have to break people down, break partners down to understand what's really driving them, and how can I meet them where they are.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I learned a long time ago, most people operate out of some type of self-interest. So understanding what that self-interest is, what that motivating factor is critical. And always feeling like, again, there's over time, sometimes you can persuade people right away, bring them to your point of view. Other times it does take time. And other times you're not going to turn people around, and they're just not going to share your values. I mean, you look at, unfortunately, what's happening in the divide we have in our country right now, that regardless of facts or figures or reality, it just doesn't, mean much to certain individuals. And I say for that, sometimes you just have to do a good job of creating coalitions of like-minded people who do share your values to overcome some, negative things that might be out there if you're unable to persuade people.
Thank you. Okay, we have our first question from the audience. It asks, being a person of color in corporate America, do you deal with imposter syndrome? And if yes, how do you combat that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off. I mean, I think being a human, you battle imposter syndrome. I don't think there's any human that doesn't battle whether my goals, I'm prepared to achieve them. And I think that, sometimes you just got to write down what you care about, what you're good at, and I think you'll be surprised at how much you've accomplished. So to me, it always goes back to the foundation of, what am I trying to achieve? And I think in most cases, the people who worry about failing haven't failed. They're just nervous about what that may feel like. I tell my students all the time, why don't you go fail at something quickly, come back, realize you're still alive, and now let's go and chase some goal. And so I think sometimes you got to get that out of your system, that I'm not prepared, and then just go and find the goal and chase it.
And I would say, the goal isn't to be perfect, right? And I think this ties a little bit into, Cedric, what you're saying about goal setting. Like, identify what it is that you're seeking to do, and perfection isn't the goal, right? It's kind of like, well, what would you like to achieve, and how would you like to do that? How would you like to go down that path to achieving that? And I think being specific about what that is, also allows yourself to give your own self some grace, right? If there's certain hiccups along the way, and you learn from those. I would also say that having allies, having mentors is really important. For me, it's nice to feel like I have some senior leaders at Goldman who I consider, very close mentors, who I can be vulnerable with, and kind of share, what's bothering me, or what's making me uneasy. And usually you can tap into some really amazing wisdom among both your peers who are allies, but also your mentors. And you recognize that the self-doubt that you may have, or the things that are kind of keeping you up at night, you realize that your peers and your mentors have gone through the same, if not worse, right, in terms of the situations that they may have been in. And so recognizing that, even though sometimes in corporate America, you feel the vibe is to not be vulnerable, right? The vibe is to kind of show that everything, you got it all together, and you dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and everything. I think finding those allies within an organization with whom you can keep it real, I think is really important. And for me, being at a place like Goldman, it's been really refreshing, right? How many just real human beings there are who in one-off conversations you can actually, connect with and be vulnerable with. And so I would say that throughout the course of your career, find those allies, right? Find those people who you can be somewhat vulnerable with, who will give you good advice. They do exist. And so seek them out.
Yeah, and I would just quickly, Celia, build on that. I think it is all about, whether you're in corporate America or any career path you choose, it is about finding mentors, people, because everyone's gone through what you've gone through. And maybe as a person of color, you have other barriers that others haven't, but generally, but also I would say, particularly for the core, understand the difference between a mentor, somebody you can go to, be vulnerable with, seek advice, and a sponsor, a career sponsor, right? So again, a mentor is someone who's going to support you and be in your corner, but a sponsor is somebody who's really going to say, in those rooms, or the further up you advance, particularly in corporate America, when there's fewer jobs at the top, someone who's going to talk about you when you're not in the room, right? It's one thing to say nice things about you when you're in the room, but what are people saying about you when you're not in the room? Are they even talking about you at all? And so finding those sponsors, those who will, again, give you advice, but also really have your back and advance you in your career. And know that, again, if you're in a role, particularly as a person of color in corporate America, you're there for a reason. You have a point of view that's important, that's really valuable to that company, and always get your voice in a room and not be afraid to speak your mind. Again, do great work and be known for that. That has to be part of your brand as well. But always feel free to stand for your values. That's at least how advice I've taken and been given, and others who I've seen who are successful have taken as well.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you everyone for joining us today. A special thank you to Cedric, Jessica, AJ, and Kayla for participating on the panel today. Next, at 11 o'clock, we have an opportunity to learn about the work City Year is doing in schools and with our communities during our Step into Service with City Year New York panel. We hope you enjoyed this session today and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.